go.
Hey.
Hey.
There we go.
There you go.
How you doing?
Fantastic. Is it too much light?
Yeah,
there too
it's
much-
a little bright. It's not too bad.
It's your aura, brother. It's your aura.
Yeah, right. I hear that all the time. You want me
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? I want y'all to meet Mr. Larry Rennie Thomas, man.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man. We met this brother about 4 or 5 years ago, man. We were at this book conference where I got my book published. And we met and we had an incredible conversation.
Yeah,
I was just amazed, man.
I enjoyed you too. I enjoyed
Yeah,
you.
man. I was just amazed at the level of the conversation.
I could tell y'all wasn't from the area. I could tell y'all,
man, we wasn't.
y'all were
man.
Yankees.
Man. We was just floating around trying to find something to do.
I know.
Yeah, we felt like we was way out of our element. I was like,
Yeah, you were.
yeah. I said, we got to find something to do. So then the movie, because I told my wife I had watched 12 Years a Slave and I was really pissed off by watching that. I said, I'm not watching another damn slave movie until we watch a movie where we kicking ass in the movie. I'm not watching another one. So the next movie I want to watch is about Nat Turner. And like a year later, she called me from work and said, babe, they're producing a Nat Turner movie. I said, what? When? Yeah. So then I said, well, I got to find out how. And I told some brother that worked at her, that worked at her university. He said, what you going to do? I said, well, he said, what you going to do this weekend? I said, yeah. I said, well, I think I'm going to try to find out where I can get some more information on Nat Turner and everything. He said, oh, so you mean from such and such, such and such? I said, yeah. He said, I grew up there. He said, there's a guy, he's a doctor. His wife was my teacher in the elementary school over there in Northampton County, Southampton County. Yeah. I said, what? He said, yeah, man. He said, here's his number, call him. I called that number, he didn't answer.
Right.
I called the next number, which is a descendant of the Francis family, the last living descendant of the Francis family. He didn't answer. The next name on that list on Google was Khalifa's. And I called him and he picked up immediately.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. So then I started talking to him and he was like, man, he said, what are you trying to do? I said, brother, listen, I am really trying to, I don't want to see this movie before I do my research because it's for me and my wife. I don't want to see it before I do my research. He said, so how many people you got coming? I said, it's just me and my wife. And he was like, brother, I usually don't do 2 people. I usually do busload. I said, all right. So, that's cool. He said, are you serious about this? I said, I'm really serious about it. He said, can you be here tomorrow at 12 o'clock? I said, I'll be there tomorrow at 11:59 knocking on your door, man. If you're going to take me on this tour, brother. And we went on that tour, Larry, the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Yeah. But I'm so glad you're here, brother.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Because me and my wife just went in. We just went in. We put. I don't know why we put that away so long. I've been watching so many other documentaries, but we just watched Wilmington on Fire, man.
Okay.
And, oh my God.
A lot of information unpacked there.
Because I got it from you when you talked about it a couple of years ago. And I started telling people about it. And then I started doing my own Google searches.
Right.
And I started telling people on the internet about it. Mm-hmm. But why don't you tell us about it?
Well, it's well documented. There are a lot of people that where we have the screenings. one of the comments that we always get is, "Well, I never heard of it. This is the first time I've heard about it." And my reply is always, "Well, maybe you weren't looking for it." Mm-hmm. If you're a scholar, you would be looking for something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know what people look for, but it's well documented. Yeah. One of the first books that came out was in 1930, which was written from the perspective of the white supremacists. The book is called The Wilmington Rebellion of 1898.
Oh, there you go.
It came out in the 30s.
Yeah.
The author is Harry Hayden. That when I first saw that book, when I was doing my research, I did my research on the Wilmington 10. When I first saw that book mentioned, I said, "Oh, they had a rebellion in Wilmington." I thought maybe there was some blacks in Wilmington. I thought, I said, well, in 1898, slavery was over with.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It couldn't have been a revolt of the Africans, of the enslaved Africans. And so when I read through it, I realized that it was from the point of view of the white supremacists. But there's always,
of course.
there's always something in there that I could extrapolate and I could use in my research. You know, what I found out by reading the perspective of the oppressor, man, you're better able to understand how you're going to place it within your story.
Yes.
So he had a list of what was called the Secret Nine, and these were the conspirators. These were the main people who were involved in implementing it wasn't a riot.
Of course it wasn't.
They always call it a riot.
It was a massacre.
It was a massacre.
Planned massacre, and was a planned coup d'état.
Yeah.
Coup d'état is the overthrow of an existing government.
Government. Yeah, that's what they did.
It could be non-violent. In this case, it was violent. So that book actually, when we were coming up in Wilmington, I was born and raised in Wilmington. When we were coming up in Wilmington, we knew about, we didn't already, but there was something about Wilmington that, you know, it's real funky down there, a lot of funky vibes. And we were trying to figure out what was going on there. So they would allow us, that book was kept on a lock and key in the local library.
Wow.
And you had to check it out. You couldn't take it out of the library. You had to check it. You had to stay there in the library while the librarian, she was an old maid, and she would stand over you while you were reading it.
Wow.
Okay.
But what we did was we would Xerox copies of it.
Yeah. Right.
Disseminated in the community. We talking about teenagers. Now, old folks didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
They didn't talk about it at all. But my point is that book was out in the 1930s.
Wow.
Helen Edmonds wrote something in the 40s, 50s. Helen Edmonds' book is called The Negro of Fusion Politics. She wrote something. Charles Chestnut wrote a novel in 1901, I think was published in 1901. It's called The Marrow of Tradition. And that's a fictional account of the incident.
Okay.
He changed the name.
I don't mean to interrupt you. What was his name again?
Charles Chestnut, a well-known African-American writer. He's one of the very first African-American writers to be published. Now, he was called an African-American, but he was a high yeller. He was from the light brigade. He could have very well passed for a white man, for a European. But see, these classifications, race is really a misnomer, and there's no such thing as race.
Yeah, it's a social construct.
Color is also a misnomer. Color was created by the slave master to divide.
Right.
Now, most of these people, you have to understand also, I guess this is a digression, but John Hope Franklin wrote a book called Free Negro in North Carolina. North Carolina had the highest percentage of free Negroes in the South.
Wow. Oh, well, you know they had to change that.
Yeah.
Well, no, they stayed free, but they were still oppressed.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Well, the highest percentage, there was the highest percentage, but most of them were from the light brigade, were high yellers. Charles Chestnut was one of them.
Yeah.
Those are 3 books that you could go to.
Yeah, we writing them down, man.
Now, there are other books there. I mean, if you Google Wilmington, what they call a race riot, but if you Google the Wilmington Massacre of 1898, a whole bunch of stuff will pop up. John Hope Franklin, From Slavery to Freedom, which has been used as a textbook.
Right.
As an African-American history course. John Hope Franklin was a very good friend of mine. He lived over in Durham. I used to go by and talk to him all the time.
Wow.
Very, very deep and humble brother.
Yeah.
No question about it. He has a serious frontal lobe.
Yeah.
Knows how to store knowledge.
Yeah, man.
John Hope Franklin wrote From Slavery to Freedom. He mentions the Wilmington race riot of 1898.
Yeah.
It's about maybe 3 or 4 sentences. But several people have written about it. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that But people say, oh, I never heard of it. Like I said, you weren't looking for it, but if you look for this, you will find it.
Yeah.
The definitive work on 1898 is a book called We Have Taken the City, written by Leon Prather, who was a retired Tennessee State University professor.
Yeah.
And Wilmington, I started a club when I was living in Wilmington called the Friends of David Walker, Incorporated. David Walker was born in Wilmington. David Walker wrote David Walker's Appeal.
Ooh, okay.
Are you familiar with David Walker's Appeal?
Yeah, we have that.
Well, he was a native of Wilmington.
Okay.
Excellent book. Well, what he does is appeal to the Christian.
See it?
He appealed. Yeah, I'd see the book, brother. I used to sell it in my book. I used to sell it in my bookstore. I started an organization called the Friends of David Walker.
Yeah.
I had moved back to Wilmington once I got out of grad school and started working at the public radio station down there, WHQ.
Yeah.
So what I decided to do with my organization is to bring Dr. Prather to town. The book came out in 85.
Yeah.
85 or 84. Around the time when I went back to Wilmington. I got out of grad school in 1980, but I hung around Chapel Hill for a minute or two, and then I finally went back to Wilmington. In Wilmington, I worked at the public radio station. I started the organization called the Friends of David Walker. And what I decided to do was to contact Dr. Prather and bring him to Wilmington to speak. So we rented a place, rented a room at UNCW, University of North Carolina at Wilmington. And the place was packed, a nice little room. It might have held 50 people. Most of them were European Americans, right? One European American, as he walked through the door and passed me, because I was handing out programs, he said, what are y'all gonna do, try to start a riot tonight? I said, no, the only thing we're trying to do is give him some kind of knowledge, some kind of information.
That's it, man.
Because this brother has written a book and he wants to share some of his research.
Trying to educate.
Dr. Prather was an interesting cat. He was a member of the Jimmy Lunceford Big Band. He was a trombone player.
Oh, okay.
He told me he grew up in a one-room shack in Mississippi.
Wow.
He had a very, very thick accent, Mississippi accent. And he told me, Thomas, I got tired of starving to death on the road with the Jimmy Lunceford Band. I decided to go back to college. So he went back to college and eventually got his PhD. He attended school in New York.
Yeah.
He eventually got his PhD and moved back south. He moved to Nashville and he became a professor at Tennessee State University. Wow. He was researching something else when he fell into this story.
Wow.
And he said, wow, he said, this story has to be told. Nobody's written it, and somebody's got to, document this horrible event.
Yeah.
So what he did was I think it may have been his dissertation. So he studied this thing and came out with this book. And he had a tremendous amount of trouble trying to publish this book. It was almost like it was a secret. We're talking about 84, 85. So he went to Simon & Schuster, he went to Doubleday, he went to all the major publishers, and they rejected him.
Yeah, they wouldn't touch it.
Right, they wouldn't touch it. So what he was eventually able to do was to get a very small press, his agent was, a very small press called Fairleigh Dickinson University, which is in Jersey, which is in New Jersey. He still didn't get a lot of play. Still didn't get a lot of play. But we brought him to Wilmington, and I was acting as his host. And his main thrust was that the incident that took place in 1898, of course, was about quote unquote race.
Oh yeah.
But it was basically about economics.
Oh yeah.
Power.
Because what these crooks did was they used the poor whites, and they do it all the time.
Yeah,
The wealthy whites. You have to understand what was happening. What was happening in 1898? You're witnessing African excellence.
Yeah.
Yes.
They did it in the 1600s in the Bacon Rebellion. They did the same thing.
You had four black lawyers, four African lawyers. You had 2 doctors. You had 14 Africans on the police force. Plus the majority of people who lived in Wilmington were Africans.
Yeah.
These Europeans felt threatened. And the ones who were in control before the Civil War felt as if they were losing their town because they controlled their town.
Yeah.
So what they were able to do, because they wanted to hold on to what they had before the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
You even had a Negro who was head of the customs in Wilmington. You have to understand, if you go to Wilmington, you understand it's a port city.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the main port city in North Carolina. So everything comes through there. There's another one in Morehead City, but it's the smaller one. Everything comes through there. Arms, liquor, whatever, goods.
Wow.
Comes through there. So Wilmington is a very, very important place.
Yeah.
And because it's so isolated, it's like a woman's high heel shoe. If you look at a woman's high heel shoe, it's way down. So
way down at the bottom. Yeah.
Before I-40, no one was going there except to come. It's a tourist trap. People come there for the beaches. They don't come to relax, because the Cayfield River is here, the Atlantic Ocean is there. I mean, my mom lives about 10 minutes away from the Atlantic Ocean. There are about 4, 5, 6 beaches there.
Yeah.
The paradise. It's also a place where the pirates used to come.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Blackbeard used to spend a lot of time there. So people would come there to party, right?
Yeah.
So the people who were in control, mind you, the wealthy class of people, they lived across the river during slavery time in the plantations. These people accumulated vast amounts of wealth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
These people controlled the whole area, right? So when these Africans started getting out of their places, you even had Africans in Wilmington who were so well off that they had European butlers and European maids.
Yeah. Right. When I saw that in the documentary, I was like, oh, wait a minute. We got it going on.
The roles had been reversed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these pirates who were in control before the Civil War, they didn't dig that too well. I mean, it didn't go well. So they started plotting. And as I mentioned in the book earlier, Wilmington Rebellion of 1898, this guy, Harry Hayden, actually lists the people who they call themselves the Secret Nine, right?
Mm.
But back to Dr. Prather. Dr. Prather he was talking riddles. And Dr. Prather told me once, I was taking him back to the hotel, I'll never forget, he said, Tommy, he called me Tommy. He said, Tommy, he said, you could take a black man and put him in a suit. He said, he'll look like $1 million. He said, that's why you always have a black man as a waiter and a bellhop, you put him in a suit, former porter. He said, he just look good. Black man just look good, in a suit, man. And we look good.
Yeah,
we do.
This is a digression. Well, not really a digression. We're the most sophisticated people in the world.
Of course we are.
This is why
That's not a digression.
This is why I say about, I don't call it jazz. Jazz is short for jackass. I call it American classical music.
Oh, Naima, there you go. To my girl Naima. I told you, my brother's about to go on here and tell you
it is the most sophisticated music in the world, created by the most sophisticated people in the world.
Hey, Brother Larry, can you do me a favor? Can you give me an origin of the word jazz, like where that came from? Where the word jazz?
This is my opinion. It came after studying it. It began around the 1900s. It began in New Orleans. And it came from the New Orleans aristocrats who used to visit the whorehouses in New Orleans. You understand what I'm saying? And while they were doing what they had to do, the musicians, were playing the music. Right?
Yeah.
So they said, I just left the whorehouse and I heard some nigger music.
Yeah.
They would talk amongst themselves, the brother. And one of the most civilized brothers of the group said, well, no, don't call it that. That's not nice. Don't call it nigger music. I said, well, okay, we'll call it coon music. Mm. And the guy said, well, that's still not nice. I said, well, let's call it jungle music. Black people in the jungle playing music. If you look at some early recordings by Edward Kennedy Ellington, better known as Duke Ellington, they actually said Duke Ellington and jungle music.
Wow.
And some of the early recordings, by Chick Webb, Chick Webb was an interesting cat. He was a humpback drummer. and they just couldn't keep up with Chick Ware. Chick Ware played all for 6 hours, man. He's a fantastic musician.
Yeah.
He even has a tune called Harlem Congo. This, you know, these crazy names just to suit these people who control these recording industries.
Yeah.
But
just so you can get the music out there, you have to put some type of
denigrate us. They treat us so bad. Well, see, so from that point, they stopped calling it. They said, "Well, don't call it. That's not nice, jungle music." So they said, "Okay, we'll call it jackass music." J-ASS.
Yeah.
The first recording of a quote-unquote jazz musical album was recorded by the original Dixieland JAS band. I mean, you can look all this stuff up. I'm not making up this stuff.
Well, I know you're not.
Original Dixieland jazz band. It was a bunch of whiteys who, it was sad, you know.
Yeah.
But they decided the powers that be, because it's rich white folks who control things. Poor white folks don't.
Of course.
So what happened was they said, okay, that's not nice either. JASS.
Yeah.
So eventually they changed it to JAZZ.
Yeah. Okay.
Now this word it could be a car or a shoe polish, anything.
Yeah.
In other words, it's nothing. You know, so I choose to call it American classical music.
Yeah. I had that conversation with my beautiful little sister before. I was telling her, I said, when y'all hear this brother talk, you ain't gonna call it that. He's gonna call it African American classical music. He's not gonna call it jazz.
See the musicians who perform this music, they don't call it that.
Yeah.
You know, somebody asked John Coltrane one time. They said, "Well, John Coltrane, what do you call your music? Do you call it jazz?" He said, "I call it John Coltrane music."
There you go.
That's right.
And Duke Ellington never called it jazz either. He called it Negro folk music. I was interviewing Ahmad Jamal once, the piano player, and I said, "How long have you been playing jazz?" And he cringed. He said, "Well, I don't call what I do jazz." I said, "Well, what do you call it?" He said, "I call it Afro-American classical music." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, it has a legacy. It has a history.
Wow.
It's written down.
Yeah.
Just like any other music.
Right.
Yeah.
It's performed by large big bands or small units." He said, he called it European classical music. He said, it's just like European classical music. Some people call it Black American music. There's a trumpet player out of New Orleans. His name is Nicholas Payton. And he has a piece called Jazz is a Four-Letter Word. You need to check that out. It's real hip. And he started this controversy. He said, "Well, jazz is dead. I'm not going to call it jazz anymore." He said, "I'm going to call it BAM, Black American music. BAM."
Bam. Okay.
That's what he called
Bam.
it. Some people call it black music, and you know, it is black music. I have an essay that I've written on my blogspot called "What is Jazz?" And my first sentence is, "Jazz is a term given to American classical music by those who sought to deny its dignity, period." You know, the unfortunate thing about it is that our people, the African people, are so lost and such in such bad shape that they don't appreciate this music. And it's basically because of exposure. Well, let me go back to Prather.
No, hold on. Tell me what the name of your
blog?
essay is and your blog.
What is jazz? Carolina Jazz Connection with Larry Thomas. .blog, blogspot.com.
Okay.
Larry Thomas, and I give lectures on the Carolina Jazz Connection because there's over 75 musicians and personalities who are native of North Carolina. Of course, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, Max Roach, and Nina Simone. These are the big four.
Nina Simone, Strange Few.
Yeah, no question about it. You know, they just renovated her house out in Tryon. She's originally from Tryon, North Carolina, which is right outside.
Oh.
But Prather, when I was taking Prather to the hotel, he was telling me about how if you dress an African up, he just looks good. Looks fantastic. You know, you put him in a suit, he looks like $1 million. He said, "But you know what?" He said, "You know what, Tommy? You just can't say the same thing about a poor white." He said, he you put him in a suit, he just don't look the same. You know, it's like
Yeah, you just don't look the same, right?
Lipstick on a pig. It just ain't, it don't look right. So this is what we've been contending with.
Yeah.
You know, sophisticated people, instead of us being our own, embracing our ownness. You know, we're trying to embrace our enemy. We're embracing our enemy.
Yep. I remember I heard Dr. Cornel West said, we've been led for 400 years by mediocre white men.
Right.
That's what he said, by mediocre white men. For 400 years, he's been led by mediocre white men. I was like, wow.
Right. And now we're producing mediocre Negroes.
Yeah.
They're producing mediocre Negroes, you know, so you know, you are what you want to, you know, are what you want to be. You know, I choose to be an African. I've been to Africa. You know, I've seen them brothers walk around with their chest stuck out over there. So, you know, even though they might be kind of confused too, because the Europeans went over there too, but they still know that, you know, they still know that they're Yorubas, or they still know that they're from certain ethnic groups, you know. So what I've been trying to do is just disseminating information in terms of 1898. I've been at it since I got out of grad school. I got out of grad school in 1980, and what I did was I went all the way back to the beginning of Wilmington, which was 1660, and brought it up until the day that what I call the Wilmington 10 incident of 1971, from February 1st, February the 1st, 1971, to around February the 7th. There was almost a week of racial violence in Wilmington, burning and looting and sniping and 2 murders, the burning of a quote unquote white owned store. And I say that reservedly because he was a Greek American in a neighborhood. His name was Mike Polis, who was in a neighborhood, was in a basically African American neighborhood that was going through transition. And when African American would move into the neighborhood, the Europeans, who were basically middle class, poor Europeans, they weren't, you know, they weren't rich people, but they moved out of that neighborhood. And that neighborhood slowly became an African American neighborhood. Now he was selling rotten meat to the people in the neighborhood. He was selling, you know, he used his credit. He had a credit line. So, and also in 1968, when he had the Martin Luther King rebellion, is what I call it, Wilmington. Wilmington had the worst one in the state. Someone tried to burn his store then in 1968. I found this out through research. But in 1971, it was burnt down. And the house next to it was burned too. An African American woman's house was burned next to it. Now, it was a year later in 1971, and mind you, these students, these boycotters, the whole thing grew out of a school boycott. They were boycotting the schools because they had turned the African American school, which was tradition in the African American community, Williston High School, a very prestigious high school. I mean, Meadowlark Lemon went to school there. Percy Heath went to school there. Althea Gibson went to school there.
Oh, wow.
So it was a heavyweight school, and it was very dear to the Black community. So when it ceased to be a senior high school, it was always an industrial high school. In other words, they wanted them to teach them some kind of trade. My parents went to school there. Everybody I knew attended Williston. So when they changed Williston from a senior high school to a junior high school and bused the students in the inner city, the African Americans in the inner city, to Hoggett High School, which was outside, suburbs. Another school was near the African American community, but it was quote unquote all white. I attended that school. I graduated from that school in 1967. That was New Hanover High School. Okay. When those students decided, because they weren't being treated very well at New Hanover High School and at Hoggett High School, they weren't allowed. They didn't have any African American cheerleaders. They weren't allowed to participate in any of the clubs. Very few of them were allowed to be on the athletic teams. So they decided to boycott the schools, stay out. And it really affected the school system.
Wow.
They were meeting at this church called Gregory Congregational Church, which was right around the corner from Mike's Grocery. So when the whole thing was over with, in 1971, they arrested some people in 1972. The Wilmington, there were 16 of them at first. They dropped the charges on 5 of them. It became the Wilmington 11. They arrested these people because they were like maybe a block and a half, maybe not that far away from Mike's Grove. They arrested these people. Mind you, when the store was burning, the firemen came on the scene, and people were firing at the firemen, preventing them from putting a fire out.
Yeah.
So when they arrested these people, it later became the Wilmington 10. It was the Wilmington 11, but one brother skied up. He left town after he got on bail and moved to Brooklyn.
Okay.
Became the Wilmington 10. And one of them was Dr. Benjamin Chavis.
Ben Chavis.
Yeah, he had come to Wilmington. He had arrived in Wilmington on February 1st.
Wow.
Cut my thesis off. He's not from Wilmington.
Yeah.
He's from a place called Oxford, North Carolina. But he was based in Raleigh.
That's where Aunt lives at.
He was working for the United Church of Christ.
Okay.
They had an arm out of that United Church of Christ called the, I want to say it was Commission for Racial Justice.
Yeah.
What they were doing at that time, mind you, a lot of the schools were being closed down. A lot of the Black students were having problems attending these all-white schools.
Right.
So Ben became what was called as a field organizer. And his job was to go from place to place and organize these students, put them in some kind of organized manner. He went to Portsmouth, Virginia. We went all over this Henderson, North Carolina. He was actually at a place called East Arcadia, which is about 20 or 30 miles west of Wilmington, when he heard about what was going on in Wilmington. So I guess you could call it his supervisor, in Raleigh called Ben and said, I want you to go to Wilmington.
Yeah.
They need some help. Well, he got a call from a minister of that church who was in the United Church of Christ, a church called Gregory Congregation. Like I said before, it's right around the corner. This minister was a European American. Students needed a place to meet, right? He went to Union Theological Seminary in New York. So, but he was a native of North Carolina.
Yeah.
He came back. He was a European minister at an all African American church.
Wow.
Wow.
His wife was a native. I don't like to use that word. I think she was a Cherokee or something.
Mm-hmm.
She was fierce, brother. She was sister.
Yeah.
I interviewed both of them, and she said, I wasn't scared of it. Because what happened was, they went all over town trying to get people, the students that is, went all over town trying to get a place where they could meet.
Right.
And they couldn't find it because all the Negro ministers said, no, y'all crazy. We're not going to have y'all meeting at our church. The only person who allowed them was this white minister, Eugene Templeton, to meet at their church. Mind you, all these students were 300 or 400 or 500 students meeting at this church, right? The Ku Klux Klan and the vigilantes came by shooting at the church.
Yeah.
Students were in the church. I mean, one brother told me, I interviewed about 100 people. One brother told me that at one point he counted 36 cars.
Wow.
Driving down what is 6th Street.
Really?
Circling the church. So what they did, they went and got barricades. They went and got these big plumbing conduits and placed them on 7th Street and one on 6th Street to keep the crackers from coming in there. And they were coming in there anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So initially they were like 300 or 400 or 500 students did.
Yeah.
And their parents came and got them because they were scared they might get hurt. So eventually it dwindled down to about maybe 30 people. And these brothers went and got guns to protect the parsonage. Ben Chavis and the minister and his wife were at the parsonage next door. So they went and got the guns to protect the church.
Yeah.
And some soldiers came from Camp Lejeune. Some soldiers came from Fort Bragg. They brought M16s. They brought whatever they needed to bring. And when them crackers was firing, they fired back. You understand? This was during 71.
Yes.
Fast forward to 72. They arrested these people. And right away, Ben Chavis incidentally, is a direct descendant of John Chavis. John Chambers was a brilliant Negro. A minister. He was a minister and a teacher too. He was so smart that he taught African slaves. This is during slavery time. He was a free Negro.
Wow.
He taught Africans at night. Of course, they had to be very, very secret about it, because there were laws. If they caught you reading during slavery time, they'd kill you. They would punish by death. So he taught slaves at night, and he taught Europeans in the daytime. One of his students actually became a governor.
Wow.
Ben Chavis is a direct descendant of him.
Did Ben Chavis later become Benjamin X?
Benjamin Muhammad. Yeah, he's an interesting brother. This brother is brilliant, in my opinion. He's a smart brother. He always lands on his feet.
Man.
He gets in trouble, but he always lands on his feet.
Yeah.
He's a Russell Simmons too.
Yeah.
Hip Hop Summit. He's a brilliant brother. He's very smart. But right away, because he's not from Wilmington, he hasn't dealt with this 1898 thing and this mindset of this, because these people in his church were rebelling against what was going on in Wilmington at that time. You know, this is unheard of. You didn't buck the system in Wilmington.
Yeah.
As a result of 1898, because everybody was scared as hell. They didn't want to buck the system. So right away, Ben said, when they arrested him, said, we didn't do this. You know what I'm saying? Plus he had connections. He knew Angela Davis. He knew all these heavyweight people. He knew Stokely. He knew Kwame Ture. He knew all these people. So he started punching buttons. And it became the cause celeb during the 70s. You know, it became the issue. Like the Trayvon, what's the brother? Trayvon Brown?
What, Trayvon Martin?
Trayvon Martin.
Yeah.
It became a really big thing during the 70s.
Yeah.
Because mind you, this is post 1968, post Dr. Martin King, because there wasn't a lot going on in terms of the movement. Matter of fact, the movement was dead. Yeah. You know, because COINTEL and FBI made sure J. Edgar Hoover
destroyed it. From the inside out.
No, they did destroy it. You know.
From the inside out.
They slowed it up. That's for sure. So what happened was, it became a very international issue. You know, free the Wilmington 10. There were marches held all over the nation. And Amnesty International took up the case. Time Magazine did a piece on it. 60 Minutes did a piece on it. The New York Times did kept on the case. Time Magazine, it was a big, big issue, the Wilmington 10. But in researching the Wilmington 10, you have to bump it to 1898.
Exactly.
There's no way you can get around it. You know, matter of fact, the Ben Chavis's church wrote a pamphlet. The pamphlet is called The Seeds of Insurrection, because what those students did amounted to an insurrection, because they rebelled against the power structure just by having a boycott and just by burning down. Even though they said they didn't burn it down, and no one really knows who burned down Mike's Grocery. But that's what they were arrested for. Burning down, conspiracy to burn down Mike's Grocery, hindering the firemen from putting out the fire, 3 or 4 different trumped up charges. So when it finally went down, they got several years. And these are teenagers. Most of them are teenagers, 18, 19, 20 years old. Ben was the oldest one. I think Ben got about 30 years or something. But they were able to raise money, and they were able to raise, and, you know, one of the arguments was, the people were saying, well, you got the Wilmington 10. They were saying, oh, Russia has doing a bad job on human rights. They said, well, what about the Wilmington 10? You know, because Carter was saying that too. I think, I forgot who was in office at that time, who was the Russian prime minister, president.
At what time? What year was that?
71.
70 was, it wasn't Gorbachev. It was a dude right before him.
Yeah, their rebuttal to them talking about, well, the United States doesn't have good human rights and this and that. Russia doesn't have good rights. They would say, what about the Wilmington 10? So they became a big, big issue, and it was a huge embarrassment to the state of North Carolina. So eventually they reduced the sentences, and they got out earlier than they were intended because they were trumped up charges. They were framed.
Right, right.
Were framed. It was a big deal. So eventually the brothers got out, and eventually they were granted a pardon, and eventually they got financial compensation for being framed. So, in studying the Wilmington 10, I kept bumping into 1898. Now, this movie came about by Chris Evert, because Chris Evert came to me when he was like 29 years old and told me he wanted to do a movie. I said, well, when they found out that you're doing a movie with me, brother,
Yeah.
you guy's a troublemaker.
Yeah.
You know, what I was able to do was take my thesis and publish it. I would give it to people.
Okay.
It was called A Study of Racial Violence in Wilmington prior to February 1st, 1971.
Yeah.
My father looked at it and he said, man, you need a better title than this. So the title was The True Story Behind the Wilmington 10.
Yeah.
And it came out in 1980, and I guess I published at least 1,000 of them, more than
Wow.
that, you know. So that's what I've been rolling with. Whenever we do the movie, I roll with my book. And
Yeah.
there's a poem at the end of the movie. I don't know if you saw you two have seen the movie, right? You've seen
What,
the movie?
Wilmington on Fire?
Yeah.
Wilmington on Fire. Well, the poem that I recite at the end of the movie,
Yeah, at the end.
I've included that in the latest edition of The True Story Behind the Wilmington 10.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's that.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Yeah, we just
got a question or something, or you know.
Yeah. See, that's what I'm glad you gave us the whole. Yeah, you got my people over here, man, on our chat just going nuts. They're like, yo, this brother's mind, his dates is on point. I said, I told y'all this is what was gonna happen when I get the brother on, man. I was trying to.
I'm just having a little fun. They're having some fun.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, enjoying myself. You know, I'm just.
Yeah, man. But Brother Larry, so how far is the reparations gotten as far as, you know, the descendants of those who, you know, who lost property and whose, you know, ancestors lost their lives and they stole property? Like, has there been any progress with them getting their reparations?
No, people are scared.
No.
They're scared to touch that, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting more and more rhythm now, the term reparations. But people like to march. They want to march for Black Lives Matter, but I want to march for reparations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
March comes off, I'm down with that one.
Yeah.
When I first started, because the NAACP, North Carolina NAACP had a convention down in Wilmington, and they invited the descendants of the 1898 massacre, and the theme of the 1898 of that convention, the NAACP convention, that was a few years ago. The theme was the 1898 massacre. But I had contacted these people earlier. Found there's a real dynamite lawyer, Al McShorley. He's a European who helps with the North Carolina NAACP, and Al really led the search for Manley. We drove all the way to Atlanta. We left Chapel Hill early one morning and met Dr. Manley. And he's a direct descendant of the editor.
Yeah, we saw it,
Yeah, but I met him, and we also went over to Raleigh and interviewed Faye Chaplin. She's in the movie. Now, I met her mother. Her mother was a granddaughter of Thomas C. Miller.
Yeah.
At that time, her memory was kind of failing and whatnot, and she didn't recall a lot. But we met their family. There must have been 8 of them, a bunch of them. And they were saying, well, we're so glad you're doing this. I took a brother over to their house, and he did some filming, and I have that on tape too. And I brought Dr. Manley to Chapel Hill. Now, when Chris got ready to do his movie, and he wanted some people who were descendants, I was able to contact Dr. Manley and Faye Chaplin. and they were included. Chris went and interviewed both of them, and they were included. But I'd already talked to them. They want to be compensated, and I've talked to several lawyers. Nobody wants to touch this thing. You know,
wow.
They're scared of it. But my man Al McShirley put it in this context. He said, shy away, don't use the word reparation. Reparation seems to be a boogeyman. I guess if you admit to reparations, then you admit that something is wrong. Because reparations, the root word for reparations is repair.
Repair, yeah.
A lot of these people don't think there's anything wrong. You know, so he said the word to use is compensation.
Yeah.
The person who loses, and he's a lawyer. It's the person who loses their arm and they want their arm back.
Yeah.
You know, so the word I like to use is compensation.
Yeah.
And in 2003, I incorporated an organization. The organization is the acronym is ICRO. Because when they killed these Africans, they left them in the street and it was buzzards circling the street, circling the town.
Wow.
Because the stench was so heavy, they just left them in the street because they wanted to set an example.
Yeah.
So I call my organization the International Organization for Compensation and Reparations for the Victims of the Wilmington Massacre of 1898.
Yeah.
I call it ICRO, 1898, Incorporated.
Yeah.
So the main thrust, it's basically a research organization. It's a advocacy organization. And what we are advocating as if you can prove through the legal process that these people sustain the laws, right? Through that process, through the legal process, they sustain the laws, that they should be compensated. I mean, that's a no-brainer. That's a no, I mean,
they definitely should.
Reparations to me is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You had a group of people who worked from sun up to sundown. They didn't receive any money at all. And you have a small group of Europeans who became filthy rich.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So there's an imbalance there somewhere.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that one out.
Yeah.
These people should be given some kind of compensation. Our ancestors, and you need to read. I don't know if you have Sandy Darity's new book, From Here to Equality.
No, I don't have that one.
You got to get that one. Reparations for the Black people in the 21st century, for Black people in the 21st. Sandy Darity is also in the movie. He has a PhD from MIT. He's an economist.
Yeah.
He's an economist.
So he figured out how much money.
Right. I think it's about.
I think I heard one of his lectures.
Oh yeah, he's my man. He's been on it. I think right now it's running at about $800,000 a person.
Yeah,
moving up.
I was on YouTube and I heard one of his lectures and he said this is the exact amount it would cost, considering cost of living and all of this and that.
Right.
And
And it's increasing as we speak.
Yeah.
It was recently on CBS Sunday Morning. They were talking about reparations, but I would recommend that everybody get that book. It's called From Here to Equality.
Yeah.
By William Darity and his wife. She's also a co-writer. And they've been working on this book for years. They've invited me to a couple of reparations functions that they've had. So he's been on the case for a long time. Been on the case for a long time. But I'm for reparations, but everybody's scared. But our people just don't have balls. They just want to go along to get along. And I tell people all the time, I was 15, 16 years old in the 60s. And most of the African Americans weren't doing doodle squat. They weren't doing anything. They were scared. Hiding up in the closets, hiding up under the bed. If it was these students who really, and it's always the students. It's always the young people. Like in the black.
That got me in a lot of trouble, Larry. That got me in a lot of trouble.
That's all right. There's nothing wrong with getting in trouble. Yeah.
I
Yeah, well,
told people that got me in a lot of trouble.
Good trouble.
Got me in a lot of trouble.
Right, that's right. It's the young people,
Don't
you know,
clapping your hands for Martin
because
Luther
they're
King.
kind of naive. They're naive, you know,
Yeah.
naive about a lot of things. And once you get to a certain point in your life, you want to be stable.
Yeah.
As it is, you know, but the only thing I've ever tried to be is a gentleman, a scholar, and a servant of people. I've run a bookstore. I've produced a reggae program when I was in Wilmington. I did a reggae program that came on Saturday night, Sunday morning.
You definitely gonna have some people on my chat right now. There's a bunch of reggae DJs on there.
I hit them hard with that. You know, I did that for 10 years. They loved it. You know, that went real well. And I did Reggae Day in the Park. I did Marcus Garvey Day. And they pretty much ran me out of town.
Yeah.
But, I would actually tell people about 1898. If they would come in my store, they kind of started calling me Mr. 1898. You know, because I just kept telling people, because, you know, I don't know how to describe Wilmington, man. It's just, because what happened was in 1898, they put these intelligent Negroes, the ones who had property, the ones who had businesses, the intelligent ones, the lawyers, they put them on a train and ran them out of town.
Yeah.
So you have a serious intellectual vacuum. You have a serious role model problem. You don't have anybody to look up to as a role model. You understand what I'm saying? From generation to generation to generation. So what you have is a very docile, scared.
Yeah.
Right, the people that were left, right, yeah.
Yeah, people that, and it's in the air. You can feel it.
Right.
You know, you could, I mean, it's not anything. You could cut it with a knife.
Yeah.
I've had people who have come to Wilmington who came in one brother came in my bookstore. He said, man, what's wrong with this town, man? He said, this is kind of a strange place, man. I don't understand what's going on with it. I said, you got a minute? And when I told him about it.
You got a minute?
You got a minute, brother?
And when I told him about it, he said, man, you telling me about some shit I don't want to know nothing about. And he turned around and left the store. You see,
ran out,
my point is people don't want to hear about this.
They don't, man. They don't want to hear the truth.
And then when Chris came out with this movie, the whole thing has just exploded.
Yeah.
You know, because people aren't going to most people aren't going to sit down and take the time to read a book.
Right.
But you will watch a movie.
Yeah.
You know? And it's a good thing that documentaries and Chris got his inspiration from that movie Colors.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he got his inspiration from, it's a documentary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know,
so do you still have your bookstore in Wilmington?
Nah, it lasted about a year.
Oh, so you're gone now. You left.
I'm in Chapel Hill.
You're in Chapel Hill now.
I tell people I live in Chapel Hill because they're signs of intelligent life. You know, this is where the university is.
Right. Yeah. That's where you gotta go.
You just gonna run into at least one intelligent person. You know.
Yeah.
I left Wilmington in 1994, around that time, and I worked at the public radio station there for 10 years. I also managed a radio station, a jazz radio station there. But I came back to the area because a good friend of mine who I went to college with at North Carolina College for Negroes at that time, then it became North Carolina Central University, started a public radio station. He said, man, I want you to come back to Durham because I'm starting a jazz station.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know you're doing a jazz radio show down in Wilmington, what you've done down there. So I worked at WNCU 90.7. I worked there for about 8 years. I was actually the interim manager at one point. And I was the evening jazz host there. I was doing like a 5 or 6 nighter there. But I left Wilmington in 1994. And the radio station came on here in 1995. I left that station in 2003. But I worked at about 7 different stations.
Yeah, I read that.
This is all I've ever done.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate. But I do more than one thing. I'm a writer. I give lectures, and I'm at the radio station. I produce shows. You know, I just believe in uplifting our people, uplifting the culture of our people. So I I get a lot of pleasure in doing that, taking people out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, I hear you.
Larry, somebody wanted me to ask you, so what about doing a reggae show on Primal?
You know, I'll let somebody else do that, man.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, somebody else. There's plenty of room.
Yeah.
There's plenty of room for somebody else to. You know, I tell you how I got started in that. My first gig, well, I didn't get paid for it, but we have a student station here at the university called WXYC, and I came down. I actually wrote the last chapter of my thesis in the student infirmary. I came down with a bleeding ulcer because there's a lot of stress, man. I was bleeding out both ends. Well, to go back a bit, I lived in New York for 6 years in Harlem, and I'm a recovering heroin addict. I was on heroin for 10 years.
Oh,
so,
wow.
So when I decided to come back down south and finish because I got kicked out of school. I got kicked out twice, actually.
He said, I got kicked out actually twice.
It wasn't grades, you know, it was conduct. You know,
yeah.
My mom was a school teacher. Both of my parents went to college, you know, because I came from an environment that was, you know, it wasn't a matter of me going to what college was I going to go to college. It was what college I wanted to go to. So when I got ready, when I left New York and tried to straighten up, I wanted to go back to school. So I went back to North Carolina Central University. And when I graduated from there, I was like 27. You know, a lot of students were much younger than I was. And I graduated in 1977. I got my BA in history. But I just got interested in history. You know, I wanted to major in journalism, but you can't do much with it. I wanted to major, they didn't have a journalism department there, but I wanted to major in political science. And majoring in political science is like majoring in nothing. You can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Except maybe go to law school.
Unless you're going to law school with it.
Maybe, you know, but it's really what politics is. Like Bob Marley called it politricksters.
Politics, yeah.
A lot of double talk. So I got involved in history in undergrad. And when I went back, I got really serious. I made all A's. And it came out in 1977. And I went straight to grad school at UNC. And I came out in 80. And I wrote my thesis in 1980. My first job as a radio announcer was to try to get rid of some of the stress because my doctor said, well, you came out with this ulcer and you have some kind of stress going on. So I decided, because I've always been interested in music, I decided I wanted to be a radio. I wanted to, you know, audition over WXYC. And what happened was, when I auditioned, the guy said, well, man, you got a radio voice. I didn't know what that was. So they let me do a jazz show on Sundays from 12 to 4. And so I was hanging out with this reggae band here in Chapel Hill, and these brothers were from Trinidad. And they had a reggae band. That's kind of a contradiction there. I found out later on. They said the people from Jamaica didn't appreciate them playing. They had they were supposed to be playing calypso, but they played calypso and what they call soca. They played soca and reggae music. So anyway, they said, well, Larry, why don't you play some reggae?
Yeah.
So I split it up. I did jazz from American classical music from 12 until 2, and then from 2 until 4, I did reggae, and that was a hit. So that's how I got started with this reggae.
That's how you got started with that?
When I moved back to Wilmington in 1984, 85, I decided I was doing like a 5 or 6 nighter, and then I was doing a Saturday night show. I did Saturday night show from 10 until 1.
Yeah. Jazz.
And then from 1 until 4, I did the reggae. But I did that as a favor, you know, just
to your friend, right?
Something new to do.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
My thing is American classical music. It's not, although I do listen to a lot of reggae and have a nice reggae collection. I even went to Jamaica about 10 years back to back. I was going to Reggae Sunsplash. I've even been to Trinidad, you know, and I found out about this dichotomy between the Trinidadians and the Jamaicans. They don't like each other.
Well, Larry, man, brother.
Running out of time.
I am so
Listen, man, yo, let me just say this to you real quick, Because we went way over our time anyway.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine because
Is this recorded? Would I be able to see it?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, send it to me.
Yeah, everybody is pretty much asking, when can you come back on our show again? So this time, we want you to come on from the 6 to 8 because the history lessons you're giving,
Yeah, I was looking
and they want to ask questions. So you hit me up and you let me know what day, like Monday or Wednesday, you're free.
You see my book?
Huh?
You see the
Yes,
book?
there's a copy of his book.
The True Story Behind the Wilmington 10.
I'm gonna put that on here.
Yeah. Well, you know,
Oh,
I'm willing to come on anytime. You know. Just
okay, Larry. Man, I love you, brother.
I didn't know we went over that tough.
Yeah. Listen, I was just checking with the producer and everything. He said, yo, you're all right. But, you know, not too long over. So, yeah,
okay,
man.
bro.
Oh, man.
I love both of you. I love what you're doing.
Yeah, we love you too, man.
Doing what you're doing and, you know, just make that dent. You know, you know,
this has been an absolutely amazing conversation.
Just do it, man. It's
yeah.
You know,
this has been an absolutely amazing conversation.
One of the things that the oppressor man resents is initiative.
Yeah.
If you have an initiative, they don't like that. You know, but,
yeah.
you know, and watch your back.
Yes. Yes.
Well, you know, we only live an hour from Wilmington, so now we have to literally go there and really like putz around now. Because I only go to the beach, but I have to go and actually walk around. Like I gotta go and do some footsteps now. You know, now that I've seen the documentary.
I will hit you up, and you just let me know one of these any Monday, and you can hit me up and let me know whatever Monday or Wednesday you're free.
No, you hit me. Yeah, you know.
Okay, I'll hit you up.
I was on the air last night. You know. So
okay.
Monday.
Oh yeah, Sundays.
I'm kind of wobbly.
Better to do it on.
We can't do Sunday.
Wednesday, right?
Huh?
They give you days to rest, right?
Monday is the only day I really get any rest. You know, imagine when I was doing 5 or 6 nighters, man.
Okay.
I'm a nocturnal. I don't go to bed till like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm just a nocturnal cat. Just, you know,
that's because you can't shut your brain off. That's because you can't shut your brain off.
I lived in the city too, so you know, so I'm used to being up all night. All right.
My brother, we love you, man. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you. We really appreciate you blessing us.
I want to be able to see this. Send it to me so I can see it.
Yes, we will do that.
All right, peace. Hotep.
All right, my brother.
All right, peace. Take care.
Peace.
Bye.
Man,